of Armchair Producers, episode 80. Can you believe it? I think we did about 69 episodes of the G&T podcast. We're on 80 now. We're old furniture at this point.
69, dude.
69.
Yeah, it's got to be. I think it came up in my Facebook memories recently. I reckon it was about 6 or 7 years ago this actually started, this nonsense.
Yeah.
And Kevin Smith is to blame. So if you have a problem with what's going on, he's pretty easy to get in touch with. He's on all the social medias.
That's true. That, of course, everyone, as you all know, is my illustrious co-host, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. Spring has sprung here in Melbourne, and you know you're getting old when spring arrives and you look out the window on a Saturday, glorious sunny Saturday morning, and go, it is a good day to dry some laundry. That's how exciting my life is right there. You look out the window and go, do some laundry today. This is going to be dry before lunchtime. This is going to be brilliant.
Nothing like showing off my undies to the neighbours.
Well, I have high fences, so I think my neighbours would need to be pretty keen to see my stuff. That way, if they do see my backyard, they can see me doing VR in the backyard. It probably look very strange.
That's actually a really good thought in the summer. VR outdoors. Yeah.
That said, I have discovered, I think, a problem. There's a reason why it's not done.
Yeah.
I think the sunlight messes with the detection of your handy doers, your controllers. So when I'm inside, if I'm doing a game, it can detect where my hands are very, very well. But it starts to, the sunnier it gets outside, the harder it gets to see your controller. So I don't exactly know the tech and how the headset sees your controllers, but it doesn't. I think it's involved that the light gets in the way.
It's a nighttime only event then.
Potentially, but it is nice when you're actually outside. You're doing stuff, and you see a breath of wind, and it kind of lines up nicely with whatever's going into the game. So, I've spent a bit of time playing super hot VR out there in my backyard, and occasionally, someone will come rushing towards you, and you'll get that breath of wind in your face at the time. You're like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's the next step in VR.
I've seen videos online of people doing that, balancing on a beam off of a high-rise building in VR, and they put fans on and things like that. Just the way that people react to it is pretty good.
The VR company I worked for very briefly a couple of years ago, the mighty Zero Latency, who are a very fine Australian company, except for the fact they fired me. That was part of the game, but one of the games they were running at the time, which was 4 years ago. But there was a beam across two buildings, and as you approached that point in the game and you walked across the beam, a fan on the wall would turn on. Yeah. And people, every now and again, the guy running the game would ask someone to jump off the beam to see what happened. The brave ones would do it. If you could only do that at home, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Did I tell you that I actually went and did one of their beta testing sessions?
I don't know if you did.
Yeah.
You're dead to me.
Yeah. Eric, good friend of the show and love of my life that is not you or so many other people. He got us some access, and oh my goodness, it was during summer last year, and those VR suits that you wear. That is not a friendly environment when they don't have air conditioning. Goodness me. But
in a bit of a tin shed, really.
Yeah, pretty much. But it is one hell of an experience. It was great fun.
Well, I was 4 years ago when I worked there for a couple of weeks, and I was just looking at their product going, this is incredible what they've built here. And the potential of what they had built even then was mind-blowing. And in a way, I'm kind of surprised that 4 years later they're not a household name. Because they were so clever, and what they'd built was next level with free roam VR. I mean, it was one of those jobs where you came to work and people would be like, "Oh yeah, DreamWorks called last night. They wanted to do something together." Warner Brothers came and talked to us about that Ghostbusters game thing, and we told them to get fucked. You're like, this doesn't happen. Where does this happen? It happens here. But yeah, I was completely the wrong person for the job as an art geek, but it was an interesting place to work for a couple of weeks, and I can only imagine how far I've come in the last 4 years.
It is expensive to actually do it as a paid customer. It is expensive,
Oh, it is $80-$90, I think.
Yeah, and it's going to retain that price tag for quite a while. I think it's very much a luxurious event thing. It's not. I don't think that they could easily kind of get variations of their setup into shopping centers or anything like that next to it.
They absolutely could, because that was their business model. Their business model was not to sell games to people and that you to go about $80 to go play their game in North Melbourne. Their game you're paying $90. You were paying to be a game tester. That was really to bring some cash in the door while they were still getting past the startup stage. Their whole business model was to sell. The whole kit and caboodle was set up to. When I was working there, it was Sega World in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah.
And now they've got 20 or 30 places in the world all have VR, the zero latency VR setups, and they are in shopping centers.
Yeah. Well, they're destination places. That's my thing, and it's sort of like it's obviously the last 6 months have not been good for destination shopping and destination event things. So here's
That's true. It's probably been a downturn for them then, but I mean, in theory, you could build one inside. I mean, I suspect there's going to be quite a bit of empty mall space coming up in the next 6 to 12 months. You would know better than me.
The irony of it, actually, because of spatial awareness in those games, and because you don't necessarily need to be right next to each other, it would be a great way of social distancing.
You know what? I mean, you could quite easily wear a mask. We've probably spent more time on my former employee than we had planned to.
Yes.
This week's chain movie, we should just move on with the share.
Yes.
You chose this week's chain movie, and I think the actor was a fair way down the cast list. He played a sniper. What's his name again?
Paul Sonkkila.
Sonkkila. He would play. It was in the interview which we watched last week, and we've now moved sideways into the 1981 Australian Peter Weir, Mel Gibson classic, Gallipoli.
Yep. This, for anyone who doesn't know, and I think there's probably actually a fair few people who might not know this movie and even know the real story of kind of Gallipoli.
If you're outside Australia, that's certainly possible. If our Russian bots may not be familiar with it.
Canadian bots.
Ukrainian bots. I apologize. It's like calling an American a Canadian.
Oh, no, not Ukrainian. Canadian.
Canadian, sorry. I heard that wrong. Yeah. Canadian. Well, I mean, I did try and explain it to Canadians once. I assume the word got around. There aren't many of them. Yeah, so you're right. If there's anyone listening locally who doesn't know the story, then wow.
It's an interesting scenario if there's not many Aussies who don't know Gallipoli, considering it's one of the real iconic moments of Australian wartime. You think that's
basically? Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say it's Australia's founding myth. Is Gallipoli. I don't want to get too much into politics.
Why you say the word myth?
Well, I mean, in a way, it's because it's become bigger than an actual event. It's like everything sort of links back to. It's almost like the moment the nation gelled into becoming Australia. I mean, a bit of background for people who aren't Australian or don't know the story. I mean, Australia only federated and became Australia from being all the separate colonies in 1901. Federation came into effect January 1st, 1901. And so Australia was only 13 years old or thereabouts, 13, 14 years old when the First World War started. And, Australians nominally, had fought in a Boer War in South Africa, but Australia didn't exist at that point. So this was really, First World War was Australia's first foray into a foreign entanglement since Federation, really. And so a lot of Australians track back that from the sort of that gelling moment where everyone sort of became Australian to the Gallipoli campaign in 1915. I get shot down by saying I've never been as massive fan of the Gallipoli / Anzac myth, but in a way it's become bigger than the actual event, because if you look at it from a historical perspective, the event itself was nothing happened. Really, I mean, it was a stalemate, right? We kind of lost. It's kind of like Americans looking at Vietnam going, "Yeah, we kind of won." You're like, "Yeah, no, you didn't." So yeah, it was a sideshow in World War One in Turkey, but had no strategic significance at all. But so yeah, in a way, like Americans now, you look at Americans have their founding myths, the George Washington stories, and Paul Revere writing into like the British are coming, the British are coming. Why do we all know these stories because they slam it down our throats in this film and TV. So Gallipoli, if we were Australia, were the Americans, if we had the cultural clout of America, everyone would know Gallipoli. Gallipoli would be the Revolutionary War of Australia.
Yeah. I thought you were going to be more referring to the myth of sort of like it was solely the British that told the boys to go over, and that wasn't necessarily the case.
Well, that does speak to the strength of the film in the sense that the story told by Gallipoli isn't necessarily the truth.
Which is not unusual in war movies.
Or in movies, period, right? I mean, there's the truth. I mean, there's the truth. And Peter Weir's version of the truth has become so universal in a way. It's been so successful and so famous in Australia that the version of events described in the film Gallipoli have basically come to be accepted as the reality.
Yeah.
Should we take a step back for the people who don't know what's going on here?
Absolutely.
The film synopsis: 2 Australian sprinters faced the brutal realities of war when they were sent to fight in the Gallipoli campaign in Turkey during World War One. I won't bore anybody with the details of why they were sent to Turkey, but the British decided to fight in Turkey, is long story short, and the Australians were basically sent to support the Australians, and the Kiwis from New Zealand were sent to support the British in that battle in Turkey. And it became, as I sort of said, an incredibly important founding moment in Australian history. But if you do see this film, do take it with a grain of salt. It is an exaggerated version of the truth, because no Australian ever went broke or became less popular by sticking the boots into the British.
That is so true. My personal favorite element of this movie is kind of going back to you referring to the Gallipoli event as being potentially like the real gelling point of Australia, is the opening sequences where we see almost like a secular element still of the states, and how Mark Lee and Mel Gibson are kind of conscripted into the army or choose to do it. That kind of slice of Australiana was really fascinating to me, and I thought it did a really good job of kind of depicting a very unusual side of the conscription into war, because it is a side of the war that we have seen in many, many movies, various versions of it, like even to the comic book variation of Steve Rogers kind of being that weak little guy trying to get in and faking his way in and all of that stuff, which kind of makes light of it a little bit. That said, he does also say, I've got just as much right to defend my country as anyone else, blah, blah, blah. So it is honourable. But the kind of the way that Australia was, and still so fresh, as you say, from being founded into one nation, I just found it a really, really socially interesting element of the story that I had not personally seen in any other war movies, particularly of that time period.
I can pick you up on something here. I think you said the word conscription.
Yeah, sorry, my mistake on the conscription.
There was no conscription. Yeah. There was actually a vote, a referendum on conscription during the First World War, and it lost. Soldiers themselves voted 2-1 against voting for conscription. So, a little historical fact for you. Yes, I am a history nerd. So we have our 2 main characters in the story that we follow. We follow Archie, played by Mark Lee, and Frank Dunn, played by Mel Gibson. Archie is a extremely promising young sprinter. We meet him and his uncle, and they are training to, for a meet coming up. At that meet, we meet two different words. At that running event, we also meet Mel Gibson, who's from the big city of Perth, who is up in the Kimberley, who thinks he's got an easy mark. He puts a bet on himself to win this race, and is beaten by Archie. At that sort of Archie harbours dreams, despite the fact his uncle's insistence that he has such a great future as a runner. He harbours dreams of signing up to join the army. And you sort of pointed it out. At the end of our running event, we sort of see the recruiting guys turn up at the sporting oval and to sign people up to join the armed forces.
Yeah,
and it is a really you're right. They do actually really portray it in an interesting way. Both the idealism of people to join, and we see a couple of different angles on it. We see Archie's, his desire to want to go and fight and defend his country. He sees it as defending his country.
Yeah.
And we see, I forget the other characters' names, Billy, Snowy, and co. Working on the railway with Frank at one point, and they're all down to sign up. And it's sort of almost their desire to sign up. I felt like, well, on the one hand, it was somewhat patriotic. It also felt like, well, this job is shit. It's a decent, it's almost because their place in the world was pretty lowly, and the army almost seemed like a step up.
Yeah, yeah.
Frank initially is reluctant to sign up. He doesn't want to go fight and die in a war, British war. One of my favorite scenes in this film is this. Archie tries to join up in the Kimberley, up in northwestern Australia. They say, no, you're too young. He's not of age yet. So Frank and he decide to go down to Perth, where he thinks he'll get away with signing up a little bit easier. In doing so, they get sidetracked. They try and hop a train that lands in the middle of nowhere, and end up having to hike across the Salt Lake to try and get out of there before 2 weeks is up. And there's a great scene where I think we actually talked about this the last time we saw this film on the show. They meet a stockman who is crossing with his camel across the Salt Lake at the same time. It helps him out. Yeah. And they stop and talk to him, and he's like, they're telling him, oh, I'm going to go join the war. He's like, what war? The war in Europe? Yeah. And he's like, but my favorite line, one of my favorite lines in Australian cinema comes up, and he's like, well, what, we're going to go fight in Turkey. Or why are you fighting him in Turkey? Why are you fighting Germany? He's like, well, if we don't stop them there, they might end up here. And he just looks around at this bleak, sun-drenched Salt Lake, nothing around. He goes, and they're welcome to it.
It's a great bit of as someone who is an expat, I guess technically, it's that particular kind of interaction. It's quintessential Australian attitude. It's like we're the arse end of the world. We know what we've got. There's only limited areas where we habit. The center of the country is nothing. Who wants to come here?
One of my great. I love speculative fiction and alternative history, and one of my favorites is when you read about alternative history ideas because Japan did have designs on invading Australia at some point in time. Had things kind of gone their way in the Second World War, they probably would have had to go at it at some point. And I just love reading about what the hell do you think you were bloody going to do about that? Like, it's a big place with not many people. It would not have been easy. And the idea that Germany was ever going to end up in Australia in World War I is beyond ludicrous.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they do sign up. They end up signing up for different arms of the armed forces, and we follow them through training in Egypt, where they have very different experiences. And we mainly focus through the middle of the film on Frank, Mel Gibson's Frank, through his experiences in Egypt before they meet up again in a training exercise in Egypt, and they both end up actually working as runners when they actually get to Gallipoli itself. Runners being people who run messages from point to point.
One trench to the next. It was a very important role, but at the same time, it was really, really fucking dangerous one.
Incredibly so. I mean, probably one of the most dangerous jobs, apart from being a medic. I mean, were there any non-dangerous jobs? Being
a general, generally they sat behind a bench.
Yeah, and sipping tea, or like freaking. Oh, darling. But yeah, so this is a much beloved Australian film. Like, it's kind of ironic that you read the trivia here, but it got knocked back for a few years by the government funding departments because they didn't think it was commercial. And I don't know what this film grossed, but it would be a very, very successful Australian film. and it does also reflect, though, at the same time, what took a while to get that funding. I'm going to put my history nerd hat on for a second, Australian film history nerd hat this time. It was a sort of a golden era of Australian cinema, where if you were making a movie which kind of really romanticized a beloved part of the Australian past, you were a good chance of getting your hands on some very decent money from the government. So this film had a $2.8 million budget in 1981, which was the most expensive Australian film of all time at that time.
Yeah.
And at least at the time, the Australian government would actually fund this kind of thing, in the sense that it was a way for us to have Australian stories told on the big screen. They absolutely don't do that anymore.
No. It's kind of tragic, considering how much we talked about it last week, how much talent there is on the cast and crew side of film and TV in Australia, and how many international films shoot in Australia as well because of the diverse locations and things. And yet the Australian homegrown film industry is really underserved by the government in a terrible, terrible way.
Well, yeah, I guess you have a conservative government in power in Australia who would say it's up to the market to fund these sorts of films. It's not the government's place to be funding, films, and a commercial, which are essentially a commercial enterprise to try and make money by entertaining people, right? Like if Australian films if they're good enough, they will be funded by the private market, which is, I don't think a solid argument. And I don't think it's our Australian government at the moment, this period, doesn't give a shit about the arts at all.
Yeah.
So, but I think personally, my opinion is that I think films like Gallipoli show the incredible value of the government investing in this kind of thing. And it wasn't just films like this. It's films like A Picnic at Hanging Rock, Break and Morant.
Which was also directed by Peter Weir, Picnic at Hanging Rock.
It was. And so, and actually talent of people like Mel Gibson and Peter Weir, who went on to wonderful careers overseas, were really nurtured by these. I'm just three off the top of my head, and there'd be many others who were really nurtured by the government sort of supporting this industry. And aside from, obviously it worked out well for Mel and Co, because they made a lot of money and had good careers, but this is a really important Australian film. And there is Break and Morant is an not equally famous, but another very famous Australian, film of the same period that came about through that government funding, which also is much beloved and a really key cultural touchstone in Australian film history. And people, there's a famous line at the end of that film where Break and Morant is about to be shot by the firing squad. And it's, shoot straight, you bastards! Don't make a mess of it. It's just like, again, probably not as famous as this, but again, a very, very well remembered Australian film. And those films just aren't being made anymore. The Australian stories like this, and certainly Break and Morant or Picnic at Hanging Rock, aren't being made anymore because who's going to fund it? Like, why would you fund a film these days, right? It's a pretty risky proposition.
Honestly, the Gallipoli was, I think last year, was turned into a mini series for Australian networks, and I think they did the same thing for Picnic at Hanging Rock 2 years ago, maybe something like that. It seems like they're just kind of like, all right, well, these have got cachet because of the past. They're not going to do anything to expand it or try and reach out further. We're just going to make this for the Australian audience because that's where the money is. Gallipoli, it made more in Australia than it did in the rest of the world.
Which is
by quite a large amount, which, especially considering the time that this movie was released, that's a lot of people, a lot of Aussies going to see an Aussie movie. And that's really good that, homegrown audiences want to see homegrown content. But, these stories are still being made, but they're being made really exclusively for the Australian audiences on Australian networks, where aside from a few shows, which are legacy shows, essentially, like Neighbours, Home and Away, those kinds of things, not much Australian content actually gets shipped elsewhere in the world.
It's a good point. I mean, there's occasional ones like, some of the stuff gets made for Stan. At least it seems like the traditional path, rather than having being sold overseas, is they buy your idea and make it for their market.
Yeah.
But there's an argument going on at the moment about whether or not Australian TV networks have a local content quota they have to make.
Mm.
And they're trying to get rid of that because Netflix and Prime and these guys, they don't have to do that.
Mm.
So, again, if they got rid of that local content quota, even those miniseries type things you're talking about there would stop being made.
Yeah.
We didn't really intend for this to be about the politics of the Australian film industry.
No.
But I think it's worth mentioning that an insanely high quality film like this, which has become a cultural touchstone for people in this country, where this is the main way they understand what happened at Gallipoli, whether that's right or wrong, is through this film. I mean, it came about because the government was like, we think it's worth spending money on Australian stories being made. And I'd love if maybe the cinema's not the way these days, but maybe people like Netflix and stuff, but why would they invest money in a film, a $2.3 million film, maybe, to be made purely to be shown to a couple of million Australians who got subscribed to their service? It's it just, I mean, I know we've done TV series occasionally, but it's a tough spot to be in.
But bringing it back to the movie of Gallipoli itself, this is, it's only done on a less than $3 million, and they do a really good job with it. Peter Weir directs the shit out of this movie with a very minimal budget, in all honesty, and Peter Weir has a proven track record of some really good quality stuff. Like the next movie on a Chain Movie Session is going to be another one of his, Witness. But he also did possibly his most famous or most well-known movie is The Truman Show. He did Master and Commander.
Poet Society,
The Way Back. He's had his sort of like touch on a lot of very, very quality projects throughout his time, and he's not exactly the most prolific director either. But what he does in this, the sequences of running through the trenches and things like that, they feel adrenaline filled, even though they are quite simply filmed. And there's, you don't have like hundreds and hundreds of people charging over the top in this huge battle like you would in a modern war movie because they want to have that big action sequence or anything like that. They consistently maintain a very personal story throughout this, and the personal combat, the personal challenge that they each go through, the idealism that gets stripped away from them, and the morality that is consistently being attacked. It's really great. And not only is it just the perils of being at war, but the attitudes and the orders that are being barked at them from the captains and things like that throughout the trenches and things. It's really, really well done, and you can't help but feel the tension being wound up and up and up and up throughout the whole movie from the very start. Just even the foot race where we first meet Mel Gibson's character, it's obviously it's not on a level of like a running movie like Chariots of Fire, but you do still get that little bit of a heart race. It's like, oh shit, this is really good, and it's all credit to the cast and the cast and crew on this movie because they do so much with so little. Really impressive.
They really do. I think I said last week I made a throwaway comment that they made a film earlier in the year 1917, but I preferred when it was called Gallipoli. I don't know if you've seen that film, but the first thing I thought of was this film, Gallipoli, when I saw the trailer for 1917, because it felt like a very similar kind of story.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the genius, and you're right, but Peter Weir was on a hot streak at this moment in time. He did this. He moved on from this and made a film called The Year of Living Dangerously. Which is another Mel Gibson film, which is probably lesser known outside of Australia, but also yet again another wonderful, wonderful film. Sigourney Weaver's in that as well. And then he moved on to make Witness, which with Harrison Ford, Mosquito Coast, Dead Poet Society, Green Card. Up and down a little bit, but all pretty high quality content there. So he was in his prime, and he made Picnic at Hanging Rock a few years before this, which was another very famous film for Australia. And a little bit overseas as well. But you submit to the simplicity of this, like if you look at 1917, they try and build in that film create, they try and build a connection between the characters because we're brothers. Lazy. Of course, you don't have to say anything. Okay, we're brothers. Well, of course they're gonna, want to run across enemy lines to save them, because they're brothers. But they don't put for a war film. Just put half of its effort, 2/3 of its effort, into just building its characters. Really, it's weird. I mean, we don't get to Gallipoli until the last act.
Yeah,
and the rest of the time is about building Frank and Archie's relationship, and then Frank's relationship with his mates in the infantry, and learning more about the kind of person Frank is, and then meeting back up with Archie and the shenanigans that they get up to in Egypt and the mateship. And I think that's what really resonates to, at least to an Australian, like the whole idea of mateship is a key sort of component of Australian culture. But we spend so much time with his characters, not fighting, not doing war shit, just being themselves, trying to get from Northern WA to get to Perth to sign up. And as we meet Frank in the railway camp and his mates reading the paper, and we see them go to Egypt. We see them playing football near the pyramids, and then visiting prostitutes, and taking the piss out of British officers and stuff like that. It's beating up local shopkeepers. It's just it's so we by the time we get to Gallipoli, we really are on board with this friendship between Frank and Archie. The amazing performances by Mark Lee and Mel Gibson. People forget because Mel's such a movie star now and kind of a weirdo. But the guy could seriously fucking act in his day.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely on the money there as well. It's the investment in the people, and who'd have thought that spending time building a rapport with your main character would lead to a really, really important emotional end when everything comes to a head. Who'd have thought that? It's almost like, this movie did that with these two guys in one film, and Marvel did it over the course of 10 years in their movies for Iron Man. And that was it.
I mean, maybe if filmmaking's changed, I would imagine if you were having this conversation with a studio executive and you took the Gallipoli script in today, I'm not going to have any action until, the hour and a half mark of a film or something, they'd be like, there's a door. People won't pay attention for, 100 minutes of character building and story. Yeah. And I thoroughly disagree with that. I mean,
Agreed.
It's done skillfully and it's well written. And I mentioned again last week, this film is written not only by Peter Weir, but also by David Williamson, who is one of the greatest Australian writers alive. I wish we could go deep. I wish we could go dive into some of that, but another time. But he's written some really fascinating plays and screenplays for Australian films and theatre. So we have great actors, we have great writing, we have great direction, and we have a cool story the whole time. I mean, of course, we love these guys. I mean, do you not want to be friends with fucking Frank?
Yeah, exactly. He's that guy that's just kind of, he's got a magnetism to him.
And Mel was a great choice for that because Mel had that incredible charisma and magnetism at his age, and he was just sort of if you read about what Peter Weir sort of said about him at the time, he's sort of like kicking back, just sort of going with the flow. He didn't think anybody saw him becoming the huge megastar that he became later on. Yeah, absolutely. But I heartily recommend anyone watching this movie. It's got a Metacritic score of 65, which I think is very much on the poor side for this. I think that this should be at least a 75 in all honesty, because of the quality acting, the great story, the great direction. It is still timeless as well. Even looking at it and pairing it up against modern war movies, it just feels like a different style of war movie. It doesn't feel outdated in any way. No, it holds up really well. I mean, it's use of practical special effects. It was shot in Australia, believe it or not, mostly. I don't think Egypt. I don't think they shot the scene near the pyramids in Egypt. Most of them, the scenes in Gallipoli were in South Australia. So it still looks great today. And I mean, I'm comparing it to 1917, which I thought was fine. Yeah. But it felt like more of a aren't we clever? Look what we can do. One they can look at
it's a technical showcase. That's what 1917 is.
Compared to this, which is genuinely engaging, memorable characters, and the ending. We won't spoil it in case you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
The end of this film is possibly one of the most affecting conclusions to any film I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. But yeah, anything else you wanted to say about Gallipoli? Because I think we've talked about Australian movie government politics. We have talked about the quality of this movie. We've talked about everything, I think.
It's very easy for me to talk about this film. Because I always said to you at the start of this podcast, I almost didn't need to watch it again.
Yeah.
I probably could have done all of this from memory because I have seen it so many times over the years. But it was definitely a pleasure to go back and watch it again. And if you are so lucky enough to have not seen it before, you have got a treat waiting for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. Now, as I said earlier on, the next movie in our movie chain session is Peter Weir's directed Witness, starring Harrison Ford, Kelly McGillis, Lucas Haas, Joseph Sommers, a young Viggo Mortensen, and even Danny Glover. So it's got a lot of faces in there, and this is one of my personal favorite movies. So I'm really spoiling us at the moment, getting us to where we're going to be.
I got to get a confession. I don't know if I've ever sat down and watched this film for end to end.
Oh my goodness! You're a terrible person. But for those who do not know, Witness is the story of a young Amish boy who's the sole witness to a murder, to the murder of policeman John Book, who's Harrison Ford's character, goes into hiding in the Amish country to protect him until the trial. It is a great story. It's definitely more of especially coming off of Gallipoli, where it is so much character building stuff. This one has got a bit more of the Hollywood romance element to it in the middle part, but it's just a very wholesome movie in the center, and it's kind of hard to portray the Amish community in a way that you don't kind of laugh at if you're in the traditional, or I guess the modern Western world of technology and everything like that. So the odd couple scenarios of Harrison Ford's very much city-based cop going to this Amish community. There's a lot of humor that comes into it, but it's honest humor. It's that difficulty. He's not judging or anything like that. It's really nice, and I think quite a lot of people, they think of anything involving the Amish community. Unfortunately, they will often think of, like, what the fuck's his name? Pauly Shore's movie that involved it. Weird Al Yankovic's Amish Paradise. It's the butt of a lot of jokes. So it's not that in this, and it's just a very good suspense-filled thriller. So
I will look forward to it. And this opens up all the doors. You can go anywhere from here.
Mm-hmm, but where will we end up?
Lethal Weapon 3.
Oh, no.
Damn it. The number 2 where he has that line at the end. He goes, diplomatic immunity.
Just
been revoked.
One of the most quoted lines ever, I think. Diplomatic immunity. All right, so do you want me to talk about...
By all means, let's talk Parasite, huh?
Parasite, yes. So 2019's best movie at the Oscars, Parasite. Hadn't watched it until this past week, and my God, so good. So good. Have you seen it, Travis?
I have not. It's on my to-do list for quite some time, but... once it's there, it's there, and you're like, I'll get to it later.
It is truly awesome. Directed by Bong Joon-ho, who also did possibly his most popular Western movie, I guess, was Snowpiercer. He did Okja, which was a Netflix original, and he's credited obviously with the Netflix, I think it's Netflix series. Oh no, it's TNT, Snowpiercer TV series. This guy knows how to work. His last big movie before this, I think, that got sort of like international recognition was a monster movie called The Host.
I think Snowpiercer got a fair bit of attention.
Yeah, got a fair bit of attention, and I really love that movie, and I just went back and watched it anyway because it's fun. But Parasite is so much on a whole new level. Like he took his game, which was already good, and just knocked it right out of the park. So greed and class discrimination threaten the newly formed symbiotic relationship between the wealthy Park family and the destitute Kim clan. It so brilliantly sways between comedy, drama, and thriller throughout the whole thing. It is absolutely incredible. Basically, the Kim family live in a semi-basement apartment that looks like a hovel. And so like when the rain comes in, they have to make sure they close the windows, or else the water comes in off the street and just floods their flat. They at the beginning, they're working out cheap ways and efficient ways of folding pizza boxes to make money. They're going around their basement apartment trying to find a signal for Wi-Fi so they can use WhatsApp, so they can find new jobs and things because they can't afford to pay their phone bills. It's a brilliant slice of that real destitute side of life that you really don't see in movies. And yet there's still this real wholesome family connection to it. Then Dong Ik, no, it's not Dong Ik, sorry. It is Ki Woo, who is the son of the family, of the Kim family. He has a university student friend who comes in and he asks Woo-sik to take over tuition of this young girl in the Park family, who's this very rich, elaborate family, because he has got plans to officially ask her to be his girlfriend when he comes back from America. And he asks Woo-sik, Ki-woo to do this because he doesn't see Ki-woo as a threat to his potential relationship with this girl. And so his sister, Ki-woo's sister, Ki-jung, basically fakes a university certificate, and he goes and bullshits his way into getting this tuition story. And almost instantly, he starts ingratiating the rest of his family into this rich family's home. He says that his sister is actually a friend of his cousin's, who is an art therapist and might be able to help the Park's youngest son, who's got a lot of behavioral issues and does a lot of art. And so she comes in and fakes being an art therapist. She then leaves her knickers in the back of the Park car to get to discredit their personal driver so that they can get their dad in to be the driver. And it just escalates, and they get the mum involved as well. And then, so like you suddenly think, oh, okay, I get where this is going. And this is all kind of done in jest a little bit. And there's still that level of comedy, but a little bit of creepy factor sneaking in. And then suddenly, woof, it takes a left turn. You go, what the fuck? Oh my God, this is amazing. And it just goes in this whole different direction that I'm not going to say anything about story-wise because it's brilliant. I didn't see it coming. I was not spoiled in this movie beforehand, and I'm so glad I wasn't, because I just went for the ride and I did not see it coming, and it was amazing. Really, really good. Every single performance throughout the whole thing is phenomenal. This is directed so stylistically. There are huge breakdown videos on YouTube you can watch about the framing of every single scene, where people are kind of breaking through lines when it's all about that social distance between the rich and the poor, and when characters kind of swap through one to another, they'll literally go through like the pane of a window, the separator, and it's incredible. There is so much intelligence in this movie. It is absolutely fucking incredible. I recommend this highly, so highly.
So I'm going to assume you would say it was a fair choice for Best Picture.
Oh yeah, there was nothing that could possibly fucking touch this last year. Easily nothing. And Trump was famous for kind of coming out and saying, "Oh, they gave the best movie picture to this Korean movie." What the fuck? It's like he clearly didn't watch it, and he clearly wouldn't have understood it anyway. Because this movie is so good, it is so funny. Even though even though it's subtitled, you can still get the comedy. I found myself not really paying much attention to the words. I could understand the intentions of what was going on. There's multiple twists throughout this whole thing that just turn it in from one genre to another, to another, to another. And every single time you go, oh, it's amazing. I absolutely loved it. So, so good.
It's interesting you mentioned Trump there because I think, I don't know if you know it, the Secretary of the Treasury in the States, I think it's Steve Mnuchin. He used to be a big-time Hollywood producer. You see his name pop up on film credits all the time. And so obviously Trump has some sort of connection into the film industry. And the word in the street is he and Mnuchin actually have been working on an American translation or remake or what do you want to call it of Parasite, in which the Kim clan they're going to change it up a little bit for the US audience, obviously. And the Kim clan, instead of being sort of this destitute underclass of grifters or what do you want to call them, the Kim clan are actually in the Steve Mnuchin Trump sort of reboot are going to be an elite team of Navy SEALs. And it's yeah, it's
Shut up.
So they're going to be. It's going to be like Die Hard, but in a building.
And there's going to be animatronic robots, I know, and there's going to be a pet that can talk. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be good. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be interesting to see what Jared Butler does with that.
Angel has moved in.
Angel has declared bankruptcy. I almost tried. I watched a part of a Jared Butler film the other night. I finished it. We might talk about it on the show.
All right. But yeah, I heartily recommend this movie to anyone with a pulse. It's really excellent, really, really excellent. And Bong Joon-ho, he's a talented motherfucker. I look forward to seeing what he does next because
it's interesting to see if he decides to take this show on the road to Hollywood, because surely after his Oscar wins this year and stuff, people are offering him large structure. Or maybe he's worked with Netflix before, so someone's offering him a lot of money to make his next thing for them in the States.
Well, he has nothing officially announced on IMDb for his next project, which I'm disappointed in because I can't wait to see what he comes up with next. But I'm happy just going back and rewatching these other movies because they're great.
I'm a fan as COVID kind of landed right in the middle of when he might have been, looking for his next thing. Assuming he had something to do with the Snowpiercer TV show. Yeah,
I guess so. But absolutely fantastic. So that's all I have to say on that.
Oh, that one, yeah. Well, I mean, it just sort of reinforces in my head, but I got to get around to seeing that at some point before they turn him into Navy SEALs.
Yeah, that's kind of probably what as I was coming off of this movie, I kept on thinking, yeah, they're gonna make a Western version of it, but it's not gonna be the same. They're gonna lose the creepy for one thing, and it'll be just a comedy. And you could easily make a comedy of this, but that's doing such a disservice.
I mean, it's like any of these. Like I remember many years ago seeing. I'm gonna mangle the French, but a French film, La Dinner des Cons, the dinner game. And for years they were talking, someone's optioned it, they're going to do a Hollywood remake of it, because the original was just hilarious, like French comedy farce. And eventually they did remake it like 10, 15 years later. There's Dinner for Schmucks.
Oh, fuck, yes. Oh, so bad.
Which was just fucking awful, despite the talent on hand.
Yeah.
And if you see the original film, it's clever funny. It's not just fart jokes and people who look silly with dumb names. And, it was seriously good. I think I saw it twice at the cinema, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
And, that kind of thing happens all the fucking time, right? Like there's an original and they somehow, even no matter what they do with a remake, they manage to basically, pull out all the good stuff and just make it a shell of what was so good about the original. If you look at the Girl with a Dragon Tattoo or Let the Right One In, the remake of that was fine. Yeah. But I mean, why would I watch that? Because the original's better.
Yeah.
And it's just some subtitles. That's all you got to put up with. So there aren't very many Hollywood remakes of foreign films that stand up to much scrutiny. But, someone can make money off it, they'll probably do it.
I'm still surprised that there has not been an Americanized version of Amélie.
Yeah. It's interesting. Maybe they wouldn't sell more. Maybe it was just too French.
Maybe. But, I feel like there must be some independent writer-director out there who's just going, you know what? We could do that set in New York.
Yeah, you could give it 10 years ago and put Zooey Deschanel in it. It would have worked. But, do you find your 2020 Manic Pixie Dream Girl to fill in the role? But I'm glad to leave it where it is because I love that film.
Yeah, that's a fantastic movie. Yeah.
But should we move on to something else a little bit lighter in tone?
Yes.
And I mean lighter. And when I say lighter, I mean significantly heavier. It's and that is the Netflix movie. I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Ominous title. This is written and directed by Charlie Kaufman, who you guys might be familiar with as the writer of films like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, Being John Malkovich, Adaptation. He wrote Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which stars the show's favorite actor, Sam Rockwell. It's an underrated film. He also wrote and directed Synecdoche, New York, and he was nominated for an Oscar last year for Anomalisa, which I haven't seen, but it does sound interesting. So Charlie kind of made his name as a writer, and now he's sort of got a rep and he's won an Oscar, so he's directing his own shit now. This kind of made me thinking about Bong Joon-ho is that I think Netflix just give you a check and say, see you later. Come back when you finish the film. I genuinely feel like that is the only way a film like I'm Thinking of Ending Things ever got made. That's basic, and I suspect that's actually, in a way, stands Netflix in good stead with filmmakers. I've made the joke many times. I think Netflix has become the direct-to-video of the 21st century. It's the start. You go, they made a sequel to that. I'm thinking of the Cloverfield paradox. Shit they can't sell anywhere else. Netflix buy it and market it well, and then you don't know what you paid for is garbage. Then I think there's the other end of a spectrum, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and that is The Irishman, right? So where basically they just give a pile of money to someone with a name, a Scorsese, a Kaufman, and say, make us a movie, do whatever you want. We put your name on the front, maybe win an award. So that's a very fucking unusual movie. And if you know anything about Charlie Kaufman, that should not surprise you one iota. Full of misgivings, a young woman travels with her new boyfriend to his parents' secluded farm. Upon arriving, she comes to question everything she thought she knew about him and herself.
Okay.
That is a remarkably simplistic description of his film.
I was going to say.
It describes I don't actually really know what this film is about, is a great way to describe it up front. It is a drama/thriller, according to IMDb. I watched some reviews online where people sort of angle it as one of the scariest movies of the year. I don't know about that. I don't think I was ever scared.
Okay.
or freaked out, but it is creepy. It is cringy.
Right.
It is uncomfortable. It
Okay.
is kind of fascinating.
Okay.
So it stars Jesse Plemons, aka Meth Damon. Best known for probably he was in Breaking Bad. He was in one of the episodes of Black Mirror, the USS Callister episode.
That's right, yeah.
Fucking great episode of a show. And he's popping up more and more in films around the place now. So he's got himself a bit of a career going.
Sure.
And I think the Toni Collette stars as his mum. We have also got David Foulis. Foulis as his, I never pronounce that right, as his dad. And they are fucking fantastic in this film.
Yeah.
But I think the standout performance here is Jessie Buckley as a young woman, the unnamed female protagonist of our story.
Okay.
I'm going to chant her name from the fucking hills. Jessie Buckley is a superstar in waiting if she wants to be. If her career goes well, like this is like when I don't know if anybody ever saw Winter's Bone when Jennifer Lawrence was nominated for her Oscar for that. Before she was Mystique, before she was in anything big, you're like, that chick is going places. Jessie Buckley, she's going to get her Marvel film, and she's going to be on the front cover of magazines for 20 years. She is a sensational talent, and she's fucking brilliant in this film. In fact, she's Irish, and she has the best American accent for a second. But she's outstanding in this film. Outstanding.
Okay.
As it sort of says, like the film starts with her internal monologue talking about the fact she's been dating her boyfriend, Jake, played by Jesse Plemons, for not very long now, but they have this amazing connection. At the same time, she's tossing up in her head going, but I'm thinking about ending things. And the first, probably after that first sort of the opening credits, the next 15 minutes are them in the car driving. That's it. Apart from the occasional, there's like, flashes of a janitor working at a high school, which will come relevant later. It's just them talking in the car for 15 minutes, and it's uncomfortable. Which is probably, what you would expect considering what she's going on in her head. You can see she's thinking about breaking up with him. But it's a fairly standard story, even if these people don't talk like anybody you've ever met in your entire life. And there's just some brilliant. I mean, we talked before a few weeks ago about my thing is two people in a room talking, and if that can entertain you, then I am all yours, filmmaker.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a little bit how this film starts. But it's uncomfortable. It's really out there, and at the same time, it's a bit creepy for some reason. Not really quite sure why. We end up at the farmhouse where we meet Toni Collette and David Foulis. I have said before, I think Toni Collette is a living national treasure, Australian national treasure. I don't think there are many people who do cringe quite like Toni Collette. Like, not like in a bad way, but in like over the top, friendly, over the top, yet with flashes of aggression. She's fucking outstanding, and this David Foulis is really, really again makes you very uncomfortable as Jake's dad. But then once at the farmhouse, things start getting weird, right? We have jumps in time. We seem to be jumping forwards and backwards in time. At different times, Jessie Buckley's character is addressed by different names. What she does for a living changes as the story moves on, and on a dime, not like there's no DeLorean, right? Like it's just, we turn a corner and all of a sudden she's a waitress. Now she's studying physics. Now she's studying gerontology. She's studying art. She's something else, right? One moment, Toni Collette is dressed like a 50s housewife and is very young. A couple of minutes later, she's dying in a deathbed, right? Like it's just, as an old woman, it's things just happen. And the whole time she's at Jake. I want to leave. I've got to go home tonight. There's a blizzard outside, and if it sounds like I'm doing a bad job describing it, I'd say I'm actually doing quite a good job because it's not an easy film to describe. It ends up, the final act is in a high school. And I believe the book it's based on, apparently this is when things started to get really, really full-on violent. I will say this for this film, it doesn't end up in violence. It is not a violent film. There is no horror. There is no gore.
Okay.
It is just very creepy, very uncomfortable. The closest thing I can kind of describe it to is Mulholland Drive by David Lynch. That sort of dream-like, there's a dreamlike nature of a film where nothing really connects to the last thing, and stuff just sort of vaguely moves in the same direction, but none of it seems connected. And you'd be at a loss to really say what that film was actually about unless you're a film scholar.
Even then, you could be debated.
And you're really you're just invited to go on the ride and enjoy it for what it is. And I don't think you're actually going to take the ride. I'm thinking of anything and enjoy it, but it is a ride. And there are a couple of incredible moments in that towards the end where you're like, oh, that is just one shot in particular. I'm not going to spoil it for people, but there's one shot when the young woman is entering the school and she looks at the rubbish bin next to the entrance of the school. I'll just say look out for that scene because that one was like, oh, I like that. That is fucking cool. And that's going to keep people. I think you need to watch it 2 or 3 more times to really get your head around it properly because there's so many things going on with it. I've heard different things said about it. I was watching one review last night that said it was like an audio book with pictures, which is an interesting way to describe a film. People have said they can entirely cerebral. It happens all above your shoulders. There's no emotion. It's all aimed at your intelligence. And yeah, I can see that. I'm not a fan of abstract film as a rule, but I kind of enjoyed this. Okay. I think you do definitely need to be in the right mindset for it. A friend of mine tried to watch it on Saturday night after a few drinks and said she couldn't handle it. I'm like, I would say that is the wrong way to go about this film. I think if you had a bad day and you're stressing out about something, I'd suggest this is not the film to sit down and enjoy because it's not an easy watch. It's going to make you work for it. But yeah, it's on Netflix anyway. And I mean, if you're looking for something challenging, something you haven't seen done before, something that's really, really going to make you stop and think, and you're going to be probably wondering about it for a few days afterwards.
Yeah.
I will put this towards the top of your list. So the one thing it kind of made me think about it is that I do think Charlie Kaufman, as a film director, makes a wonderful writer. I think what made his earlier work great, and I think I watched a review by Mark Kermode. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a British film reviewer who I'm quite a big fan of.
Heard of him, yeah.
BBC Channel 4, or I don't know. He's British. You know everyone is British, don't you?
Of course.
So he basically said it's been years since something that came out from Charlie Kaufman that he really loved, and I would have to agree with him. I liked this. I didn't love this. But when you compare it to something like Eternal Sunshine or Being Beyond Malkovich or Adaptation, 3 great films, the difference between those films and this film is he didn't direct them. He's a fucking great writer, but he went out in Being John Malkovich and Adaptation. He got Spike Jonze, who I think is a great director.
Yeah.
Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, he got Michel Gondry, who was also a fantastic director. And that meshing of magic between Charlie Kaufman's crazy and Michel Gondry's sort of, incredible visual style and, visions of what something can happen on the screen. These 2 things go well together, right? So it's a little bit like when George Lucas stopped directing Star Wars films back in the 70s and 80s, right? Yeah. And his sort of writing style and his, ideas against someone who's actually a competent director, sparks fly. And I think Charlie Kaufman, he's making, as I sort of said at the start, he's making the films he wants to make with Netflix, and that's probably all you'll ever want as a filmmaker. Yeah. But I would love it if he decided to go back to working with really great directors again. So I don't think he's a really great director. I think he's solid.
Okay. Yeah, I will check that movie out
I would be fascinated to hear what you think of it.
It's like, it's about tiddlywinks.
Well, it could be. I don't know.
All right. Well, the last thing that I want to just touch on this week, ladies and gentlemen, is the new Battle Royale game available on PlayStation, Xbox. I'm playing it on Nintendo Switch. It's also available on Mac and PC, I believe. It is one called Spellbreak. Now, this is an interesting one. It's only been out for, I think, 7 days at this point, and it is very much your quintessential Battle Royale. If you've ever played PUBG, if you've played Fortnite, any of those kinds of games, it's that sort of thing. Up until yesterday, I think it was squads only. They've only just opened up the solo department of it, and they haven't opened up duos yet. But there's a couple of things that make this stand out a little differently. So first up, the art style is very, it owes so much in its art style to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And not only on that kind of semi-cell shaded kind of look to it, but also the clothing and the world building that they have is like destroyed castles and farmhouses and things that would be absolutely perfectly positioned if they were dropped into Breath of the Wild. It is kind of, in a derogatory way, I guess you could say this is Breath of the Wild Battle Royale, because even the characters, you can choose a male or female, and then you can customize them with different costumes and stuff. Past standard for Battle Royale games. It's so much Legend of Zelda, which is always going to be a quick shortcut to my heart. But the other thing about this game that makes it stand out for me is it's not just pick the best weapon and shoot the fuck out of everyone. The traversal of the landscape in this is really good fun. You've got your standard jump, but you can levitate for a certain amount of time, which makes kind of climbing up really good fun. There's special runes that you can pick up with the A button that you can go invisible. You can do a wolf's bane where it'll show where enemies are within a certain radius of you. You can fly. There's a number of different things like dash and high jump and slow fall, simple things like that. But then you also have gauntlets, one for your left hand and one for your right hand. And they only have, I think there's 6 or 8 variations. There's toxic, lightning, fire, ice, earth, and lightning. I'm pretty sure there's 6. But not only do they have like a strong attack and a weak attack, but when you complement them with the other gauntlet, which will be a different element, I guess, they can play really nicely. Like if you have the wind gauntlet, you can create a vortex, and if you happen to throw some toxic cloud in there, it becomes a toxic vortex. If you use the toxic and make a mushroom cloud and you freeze it, you can stand on top of that to get higher up, or you can freeze people inside it. If you are using a lot of ice, you can skate along it to speed up your movement across the terrain. If you then strike that ice with lightning, it electrifies it and you can shock people that are on it. There's a lot of kind of interconnectivity with all the weapons that you play. And when you have a squad that works together and is kind of going, all right, if you go for those two, I'll go for those two, I'll go for those two, you can really complement a team. And someone might throw up a firewall, but if you've got ice, you can put that out. Or if you've got wind, you can dissipate it. If someone has thrown down lots of toxic goo everywhere, you can set fire to it, or ice, it nullifies it, and you can complement things like that. It's really, really good fun.
How are you finding it on Switch?
It's smooth as butter. It's lovely. The controls are nice and simple and fluid. It's a little annoying that they don't have gyro controls, which is something that a lot of Switch games and Switch versions have. That just means that you can kind of aim a little bit quicker. It's a bit more akin to like the keyboard and mouse controls of the PC world. It just means that you can get the upper hand on others quite quickly. I started playing straight away, and in the space of a week, I've gone from being on the winning teams to pretty consistently losing. But I'm never very good at these games, but I'm enjoying it. I jump in for a couple of rounds and play. It's just it's a battle royale game kind of made for me, with that Zelda heavy vibe to it, the kind of Dungeons and Dragons magical element to it all. There's something coming in the future. It's a tab along the top that says chapters, so I'm curious to see what that's going to be, whether there's going to be some story element coming in. But it's really, really enjoyable. I do recommend it. It's free to play. It's worth just getting in there and giving it a try. Why not? You don't have to put any money down if you want to get different like trails as you descend from the sky and all that sort of stuff. You can just like
cosmetics.
Yeah, all of those cosmetics, they're all there.
It's the same type of thing as say Apex Legends, right? Like I mean,
yeah,
that's basically we're selling cosmetics in that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You know, when you were playing Apex Legends, you talked about the ping system. And they've incorporated a version of that into this game. And so like, oh, I found a legendary fire gauntlet. I'm not using that. I'll ping it for my other party to come and have a look at, you know.
Everybody ripped them off for that one.
Yeah. It's a great system. It works. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's, what do they say? Good artists copy, great artists steal.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about Spellbreak, because it's just a really solid game. Who knows if it's going to have any kind of longevity to it? I hope so. It certainly seems to be. I've not had to wait for a game at all, but like I say,
I imagine there are a whole lot of battle royale shooters type games, whether you call it a shooter or not. Battle royale games on the Switch.
Well, it's Fortnite, and there's this. There's a Rogue Squad or something like that. There's one that came out very recently, but I really didn't like it. I tried playing it, and the controls are really trashy. It didn't play very well on the Switch. But you know, that was beta launch that I played it, so hopefully it's gotten better. Yeah, I don't know if there are a lot on Switch, but it's nice to have variety, and it definitely feels at home on the Switch because of that aesthetic similarity to Legend of Zelda, which, incidentally, we got another update on some more Legend of Zelda stuff for anyone who's interested. Legend of Zelda, The Age of Calamity, I think it is. It's a Musou-style game, like, one warrior versus an entire army of people, but it tells the story of 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, when the armies of Ganon rise up to take over Hyrule. And I think it's just from the early trailer that got released last night, I think it was. It looks like really good. It looks really respectful to the art style and to the general feel of a typical Zelda game. And it seems to be a bit more story focused, so color me interested. Unfortunately, they did also say that the sequel to Breath of the Wild is still a ways off, so probably not going to happen by the end of this year. Anyone who is deluded enough to think that that's going to happen, it'll be next year. But yeah, it's some interesting Zelda and Zelda-inspired stuff happening out there.
Legends of Hyrule has just come out, right?
Hyrule
Warriors?
Yeah, Hyrule Warriors was one that came out, I think, 3 years ago at this point.
I thought I saw a new one ready to come out. Must have imagined it.
Well, there was, when the Switch launched, there was Breath of the Wild. The next year was Hyrule Warriors. Then there was...
okay, this is the thing you're talking about. Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. It's the same thing.
That's it. Yeah. So that is... it's not a sequel to Hyrule Warriors, but it's in that same idea of gameplay. This is very specifically... This is, I think, the first time in canon that there's been a game, like a sub-game for Legend of Zelda that has kind of tried doing something differently. There was a couple of weird ones way back in the early 90s or late 80s, I think, but this is the first in a long time at the very least.
Exciting times ahead for Nintendo fans.
Well, it's exciting times for all because we've got the unofficial and then officialized leak of the Xbox Series S, which is releasing on the 10th of November. Still no prices for the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5.
300 US is what I heard this week, and obviously that could be all speculative, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, who knows? It's Xbox and PlayStation are playing a little bit of hide the price chicken, I think.
It doesn't really make any difference because, I was thinking about it today. A friend of mine in the States posted about it and said that was the source of a $300 US rumor I saw, and I'm like, it'll be about 600 Australian then. So
yeah,
but why would I want to buy one? That's the problem. I mean, that's the problem that Microsoft have still. I mean, I don't exactly know. We'll wait and see, I guess, what exactly is at launch, but it won't be that Halo game that everybody shat on. And I don't know what's shipping with a PlayStation, but they've got a pretty good lineup of stuff they could ship with it, assuming depends what's ready.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting for someone to come out and go, this is a reason to buy the Xbox One S on day one. Yeah. I don't see one right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy either console day one because there's kind of legacy quality sequels and stuff coming to the PlayStation 5, but they're not games that I've played the first ones of, and if I have, I've not particularly enjoyed them. They're just not my kind of game. So why would I buy them for fork out $700 for a console and a game when I'm probably not going to enjoy it? And the Xbox Series X, my Xbox One X is still playing all the games perfectly fine. And at the moment, there's no game at launch that's only going to be on the Series X or the Series S that I'm kind of going, oh, fuck yeah, I've got to do it. I can wait. I'm happy to wait.
We did talk about this when they had their big schmozzle of a thing showing all the games they were supposed to get us excited about. It's a worry, right? I mean, because to be entirely frank with you, I can afford one very easily, right? I mean, you'll see right here next week behind me, there should be my arcade cabinet will be here. There's one coming.
Oh, so, yes.
But, I have nothing but spare time right now, and I need a dopamine hit, so I will buy things I don't really need. Microsoft, but I do need some sort of justification in my head to go, well, if I can get the Xbox One S, whatever they're going to call the fucking thing, if I can get the new Xbox, I could do that thing. I could play that game that looks kind of cool, or I don't know what else I could do. So but there's not even that justification in my head. Like if I get the arcade console, I go, oh, I can play NBA Jam and 3,500 other arcade games I liked when I was young and had a life. But it's the Xbox just really you got to launch with something. Come on.
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of debates online with a lot of people saying, "Oh, but you're going to be able to play 4K." It's like, well, I haven't got a 4K TV, so it doesn't make any difference to me anyway. So, if I did want to do that, I'd be looking at well over $1,200, $1,500 to get a 4K TV. But these things are saying that they can stream up to 8K, so I would still be behind the times for my TV. With a console where there aren't actually any brand new games that are telling me I have to play it right now, when all of the games and their Game Pass and all of that greatness, I can still happily play on my current system. Why would I do it? I wouldn't. I'm not going to.
Give a shit about that much of, confirmed launch titles. Fortnite. Yay.
Which we can already play.
But you can't play it in 4K.
I could if I played it on my phone.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, we don't want to get into that, but I would love to buy one at some point. But please, Microsoft, give me a reason, and I will consider
reason to buy it, and we'll give you money.
Maybe we have to wait for Cyberpunk.
That is the one that's on the horizon for me. So like, ooh, yeah, I want the I want the best experience for that one.
And if that's not available on the Xbone, then that would maybe just about do it, because I'm very curious.
Yeah. It's coming from a top quality studio. Witcher is a phenomenal series. Witcher 3 was phenomenal.
No microtransactions.
Well, apparently there are going to be microtransactions in the multiplayer stuff, but apparently they're not going to anger the players, which I'm sure has never been said by a microtransaction executive ever about any game ever.
You know what? I think it's actually a balance they can strike, right? Like, I think people, when it came to Red Dead Redemption 2, kind of like, that game, the solo campaign of that was so epic, so well produced, so brilliant. Okay, you can have your fucking Red Dead Online, and it can be a pile of shit. It can be a microtransaction-filled mess full of griefers. We'll give you that one, as long as you gave us what we wanted in the single-player campaign.
Absolutely fair. You know, if everyone will get their kicks from one thing, I think it's pretty fair to say that you and I vastly prefer the story game, the solo game, maybe the co-op story campaign compared to the online shit show that is most games.
If we ever find a game we both like and can play online together, that might change.
That is true. And if anyone listening has a recommendation for a game that me and Travis could play together online that you think we would like, let us know, please. Hit us up on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever, because I'm happy to, fill my time doing fun stuff with friends.
Pretty much, yeah. We haven't found one yet, but I am open to new suggestions.
Yeah. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, our last little quick thing, because of timetabling, of course, being always against us, we got a teaser trailer announcing a trailer for Denis Villeneuve's Dune tomorrow. Did you watch the teaser trailer?
I have no interest in Dune.
None?
None. Zero. I haven't read the books. I saw the overrated, bloated pile of shit that was the David Lynch 1984 version.
That is not overrated. No one really likes that.
No, I have friends who think it's a masterpiece.
Were they kicked by a donkey?
There are people out there who love that movie. So yeah, and they kind of like, I'm like, apart from Sting in the winged underpants, it's really not much to talk.
There's Patrick Stewart in there, man.
Everyone has their first flop, and this could be Denis Villeneuve's first flop. I don't think it is the unconquerable mountain of filmmaking he's taken on here. Others have tried and failed, and it just I don't have really. I mean, I will see it probably at some point because his last few films have been so good. Mm-hmm. And he proved me wrong. I was ready to be bored shitless by Blade Runner 2049, but I loved it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not sitting here at my keyboard going, "Show me the fucking trailer." Mm. I'm very ambivalent.
Mm. The teaser trailer for the trailer it showed nothing. It didn't have any real pop incentive to do it, but I am so keen. Denis Villeneuve, I have complete and utter faith in his abilities. He has pulled together one hell of a cast. So I will be talking about that trailer next week. And if Travis does get around to seeing it, maybe he'll have some views, but otherwise I will probably just go for about 3 hours.
I'll probably have a look at the trailer. It's just like I could see it today. It was just like hype bullshit, preview to preview, and I'm like, just give me the fucking trailer.
Yeah.
But it's an ad. It's an advertisement for your film.
It's an advert for an advert.
And I'll be curious. Like I said, I just in Denis we trust, but yeah, the actual source material I have no love for.
Well, yeah, still love you anyway. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube. There is apparently going to be a slight change potentially on the YouTube side by the end of this month. I'm going to be looking into that. Might be a YouTube event rather than just straight to the Armchair Producers channel. But I will keep you posted once I've read more about that. But I have been George Tarrant. That has been Travis Croft. We are your armchair producers. See you next week.
Good night.